Yeah, so the lead up to it, before I went on leave, we had an issue, a really unfortunate issue at RAF Bryce Norton, which was the runway was melting, and that's not great. And so we we were given the tipper that things were not going exactly as per plan in Afghanistan, and with the runway melting, my first issue was they'd said, okay, the A400M can operate and the Herc can operate, but Voyager and C-17 are pretty much grounded because there wasn't enough space. And I went, whoa. I went C-17, I only need this much stuff, and let's draw this circle around. And as long as I've got basically 4,500 feet, which I did have, then I can operate this far, or we can bounce out to one of the other airports and still get the task done. Because
how many C-17s does the Royal Air Force have?
So 99 Squadron has 8 C-17s, and we've only got one squadron, and so that is our C-17 squadron. Now we have a training squadron, which is 24 Squadron, who train our pilots now before they come to the frontline squadron. But essentially, 99 Squadron and the Air Force have 8 aircraft. So that was it. That was going on, and so we managed to maintain operations just before I went on leave, and that was kind of just before August. And then for the first 2 weeks of August, I was on leave, and I was in the UK, but all of this was kind of building up. And then we were working out how many people we could get, and we were told it was going to be maybe 2 days of about 3 flights per day, and that was going to be the ask, just to get those people who were associated with the UK out. And you go, okay, and have you done the numbers? Okay, yeah, it's probably about 1,000 to 1,500 people is what our current estimates are. And I went, okay. Now, one of my squadron leaders, flight commanders, was kind of leading all the preparation up to that. But you could see that this was snowballing, and it was building up into something which was bigger than Ben-Hur. And then whilst I was on leave, it was like, okay, and we sent some people forward. Initially, we sent our 16 Air Assault Brigade out to theatre. So they are a combat battalion, airborne combat battalion, and they went in there. And we had an issue where one crew they got onto the ground, but the aircraft with the ammunition hadn't managed to get in. So I got a phone call from one of my crews, and it was like, they want us to take off, but we've had a number of beers now, and they want us to take off. And I was like, okay, let's manage this. And we went back to the authorities and said, we can't take an aircraft off now, but actually we can do this, and we can crew rest in this other place, and we can get it there, and it'll be 3 hours later. Is that fine? It's like, yes, fine. So no reputational damage there due to people having to fly after beers. But the operational imperative, you could see that it was building, and that something was really going down. If you end up with a brigade combat team in theatre, and they are now fully armed, we had our 1-star extremely high readiness headquarters deployed to Kabul as well, and those guys were tooling up and arming up, and they were short of ammunition, and they thought it was it was only due to Taliban choice that they didn't overrun the airport. And I think that's important. We were allowed to leave, and then by the time it got to the end of August, it was like, okay, you've had your time. And so that was an important factor, but you didn't know that was going to be the case, kind of 2-3 weeks beforehand. It was, the Taliban were kind of overrunning the country, and so that is going to cause concern for not only the people on the ground, but the people who are affiliated to the people on the ground. So that's kind of the build-up. In the end, we had to send some aircraft forward. So we sent the aircraft forward. We ended up with initially 2, then 3, then 4 aircraft, and the crews were going forward. And very quickly they started flying some people out. First a couple of hundred. I discussed before, I'd written a note to the 2-star to get approval for up to 350 people, and so that was kind of approved. So that wasn't a thing. People were jumping on the floor. They were just putting the straps across their laps, and I think the first lift out was about 250. Then it went up to 300, and very quickly up to 350. So it was kind of working, and then we end up with the situation where the the Afghan air traffic control kind of fell, and you end up with, another one of your podcasts, I think, where that aircraft took off with 800 people on board, with people falling off, and the aircraft, the airfield got overrun. That obviously paused operations until we were able to, control the airfield. After that, operations resumed. Now, I got there after operations resumed and things were a little bit more stable. Got there on the Monday. My first mission in was on the Wednesday. It was a daylight flight. But when I arrived, I then had pretty much 6 aircraft either there or operating to Kabul or back to the UK, and it was now fully up to speed. There were still some things to iron out in terms of, we had 3 aircraft landing in Kabul, one after the other with only an hour in between. So there wasn't the ability to process the passengers. So I had some crews frustrated because they were taking off with only vehicles on board and not people, and they're there to evacuate refugees. So some things to iron out, but I took off with 433 on my first trip and went, hey, I'm now part of the club. Happy days. And it's gone relatively straightforward. And so I was going, okay, we'll just do a couple of more trips like this and crack on. One of the limiting factors that we had was night vision goggle qualified crews. So one of the reasons I'd gone out was because I was night vision goggle qualified. You'll appreciate that it's in the middle of summer. So in the middle of summer in the Northern Hemisphere, there's not that much nighttime in the UK. So it's quite difficult to maintain currency. And you'll also appreciate that it was in August and lots of people are on holiday, on their family holidays. And so ripping people out of their summer family holidays is going to have retention issues. So it kind of links back to the airline stuff. You don't want to completely screw people over. So it was, and also we had one person there who'd already done 8 missions in. This guy, and he got no national recognition, and this is kind of not a sore point, but it makes you slightly embarrassed because you end up in a situation which you can't avoid. But this guy did 8 missions, and with his crew did 8 missions and flew about 2,500 people out by, with him and his crew. That's a significant effort.
That's huge.
Those guys were tired and they were not getting very much sleep, so it was appropriate to rotate. So those were the 3 factors: not enough NVG crews, people were on leave, and you've got some people who are really tired. They've been there since the start. So rotating the crews, and so clearly I was good to go. I kind of fulfilled all those criteria. There was already a detachment commander there, so I didn't need to fulfill a leadership role, and I was just there to go and help out. So done the first mission. Second mission, we get the intelligence briefing, and we're told that there may be a significant event that goes on, and they're trying to mitigate it. But ultimately, as we're flying into Afghanistan, and we cross from Pakistan into Afghanistan, we're told to hold, which was rubbish direction because we're not going to hold in the middle of nowhere. But we get told to hold because a bomb's gone off at the Abbey Gate. And it's like, okay. So we go down to long-range cruise and continue making our way to Kabul because we're either going to go one way, we're either going to go back or go forward, but we're not going to sit in the middle of nowhere. So we crack on forward and we hold for another sort of, only 15, 20 minutes. And then in the end, we're cleared to make an approach and land in Kabul. When we land in Kabul, it is absolute chaos. It's chaos on the approach in because people are trying to take off very quickly, and they're trying to take off without clearance. It's chaos on the way in, so we kind of have to sort ourselves out as aircrew holding, and we're kind of good to go, and our passengers are ready, so we'll head down. And when we land, turn off the runway, and the ground force are driving Humvees around, and I was doing like say 20, 30 knots taxiing to the pan, and I've got a Humvee driving at 40, 50 miles an hour underneath the wing, and you go, this is not right. And so I just slammed on the brakes and went, right. And I let air traffic know, and I went, if you're in comms with these guys, they need to stop driving underneath the wing. Because one of them must have been so close to the engine, anhedral wing on the C-17, the left-hand engine, and you just go, I'm fairly sure he's going to get quite close to that. So we went in and we were told, look, we're not 100% sure who's running around the airfield right now, so keep all the doors closed and turn all your lights off. And again, that's unusual. You don't normally get that in the civvy world. So
Non-standard.
So that was it. Now, so the situation then goes, right, we're parked up on the pan. We've got the engines running, so it's all engines running offload and engines running on load for the passengers because there's no fuel there, and you're burning quite a lot of fuel. So you're burning about £4,000 per hour when you're doing with the engines running on the ground. So you haven't got an endless bucket of fuel.
How much fuel does a C-17 carry? I have not asked anyone that yet.
Yeah, so it can carry 245,000 pounds. We were flying anywhere between sort of 150 to 160,000 pounds probably for a mission like that.
Okay, that's there and back, probably with like 30 minutes of holding.
Yeah, there and back with normal divert fuel and engines running fuel and a little bit for mum so that you can keep the engines running and should there be any eventualities on the ground. But Kabul, 6,000 feet high, and you've got 17,000 foot mountains around you. So you are performance limited. So you can't go in there with, say, 200,000 pounds or anything like that. And some of the US tankers, I think, were taken off with shed loads of people, but they had tankers in the overhead. So they were able to. Now, we can't do that from an Air Force perspective. Royal Air Force, we don't have the ability to do air-to-air refueling. So
Gotcha.
What you've got is what you've got. So fuel,
the one you're with.
we parked up for about half an hour and we're burning this fuel and going, well, we've got a DP here. So decision point on when we go, okay, that's fine, no passengers, we'll head back. But what wasn't an option was turning off the engines and shutting down and then waiting for the passengers to be cleared to walk out to the aircraft. So after 30 minutes, we get told, right, we've got 365 passengers for you. Okay, great. That's a pretty much a full load. And they're cleared to walk across the pan and we start loading them up. That's about a half an hour process. And in that process, all of the lights go out on the airfield, like all of them. And we're speaking to air traffic and the guys from 82nd Airborne are brilliant. They go, hey, we got no idea why the lights have gone out. And he said, it might be that they've blown up the generator, or it might be that the generator's run out of fuel. We don't know, but we're not going to be able to find out anytime soon. And it was like, okay, that's a bit of a predicament. So we've now got the engines running and an aircraft full of fuel and a decision to make. Are we going to go or are we going to stay? And, it really wasn't an option to offload the passengers, go take them back to the compound. I mean, a lot of those guys, they were so distressed. Only a couple of hours before, a bomb has gone off and a number of their loved ones had died. We had a couple of people who walked on board the aircraft, and as soon as they crossed the threshold for the aircraft, they passed out because it was almost like that's it. I've got to the end of my tolerable fatigue, or some people walked on board the aircraft and they were vomiting, and that's how much stress and anxiety that they were in. So offloading these passengers and putting them back into a compound didn't seem like the right answer at the time. Those guys were being sorted out by medics, and we had our force protection on board, and they were helping out, and they also did absolute amazing job. Whether it be with the kids were going, wow, an amazing aircraft, and were kind of almost oblivious to the scenario. And then when the adults were coming on, this is literally a plane to freedom, and they're running away from an oppressive regime. So so many different emotions, and the load masters, the force protection, the medics on board were dealing with that. But at the front, I was literally only focused on fuel and being able to take off. So I'm there, and I'm aware of some other regulation which our Hercs operate to, more in the special forces environment. But they're allowed to take off on strips which are unlit for certain different reasons, and so it's like, I think we need to apply this regulation. Look, Kabul is a massively long runway. It's really wide. It's painted. Do I think that I'm going to have a runway excursion? Am I going to leave the runway? No, I'm on GOGS. I can see the painted surface. There's no risk there. It comes back down to that operational risk. It's like, the reason you want MBG lights and the IR markers and stuff like that is so that you don't leave the runway surface. And so anyway, I had the chat with the other pilot, and he completely agreed. And so we were going to go for this. We we ended up taxiing out. There were 2 aircraft. There was an A400M and a reach call sign to another US C-17 that were waiting at the threshold. And so I went onto so we were able to actually take off from the intersection, and we went for it. So rolled onto the runway, 30 to 40 knots. We were kind of good to go because we were doing an intersection takeoff and the performance allowed it. We were up at full power anyway because the only option was full power because of the mountains and performance. It's still relatively warm. When I say relatively, it's still August in Kabul, so it's hot, it's high, and even though it's at night, it was still about 34, 35 degrees. So you're using full power. So we're cracking along down the runway, and about 85 knots, we look into our right 1 o'clock. So I'm flying, the other guy's in the left-hand seat, and he is he's the non-operating pilot, or the pilot non-flying. And he goes, right, 3 vehicles. They've got their headlights on, and they're driving down the opposite taxiway. And he goes, right 3 o'clock. Sorry, right 1 o'clock, 3 vehicles, no confliction. And I went, yeah, tally. We carry on, and about 95 knots, that's when they turn right and come ahead of us. And we probably had about 1,000 feet to. They were 1,000 feet ahead of us. And immediately I said, we haven't got enough space to stop. And the guy to my left went, yeah, agreed. I went, so I'm gonna keep going. We'll get to takeoff speed. And he went, agreed. So I carry on, and that conversation all happened really quickly. The time kind of slows down. It's like your Matrix moment.
Yeah, I was going to say, from a pilot's perspective, to really hammer the point home for those listening, haven't been. It's like, all right, it's about 80 knots when you see them and start talking about. I mean, you're probably talking about 3 or 4 seconds, and now you're probably at 105 knots. It's all ticking up. That's what I'm envisioning in my head. At least.
So that's it. We see the vehicles at 85 knots. At 95 knots, they turn right across the runway. Very clearly, you can see a pickup truck, a bus, and another pickup truck. And I've already determined that I can't stop. And so I'm now trying to work out what speed I can get to. So rotate speed is 125 knots. And but 105 knots, it's really clear that if I don't do something now, we are going to hit those vehicles. And so, the flight data recorder shows that at 108 knots, I start doing a relatively gentle stick pull. The normal stick pull for a C-17 was somewhere between 15 and 24 pounds of force. When they went through the analysis, they couldn't find my stick pull on there for rotate, and it was an 11-pound stick pull, and so they put all the gains down. So they went, okay, yeah, you were really gentle, but essentially 110 knots. 110 knots, we lifted off the ground, and once we got enough height, I was as gentle as I possibly could be to make sure I had enough height to miss the bus. So we didn't do a normal rotate where you go 3 degrees per second to 15 degrees nose up. No, it was enough height and don't stall and just miss the bus. And that was it. And then we watched the vehicles go below us. And you know what? I was flinching at the time. I was going, "Are we gonna scrape something?" And it was pretty uncomfortable. And then it was clear that we'd cleared them. And so we were about kind of 5-6 degrees nose up at the time, and then just kind of carried on up to 15 degrees nose up, and then carried on with the normal takeoff. The pilot, there was no discussion about like should I turn right or turn left or do anything like that. But it was just the only thing that's going to save us here is height. The loadmaster. Di, she was in the left-hand troop door, and I said, Di, how much did we miss those vehicles by? And she went 10 feet, if that. And she was able to clearly see the pickup truck. The first pickup truck went under the number 1 engine. The bus was under the number 2 engine, and then underneath the undercarriage. And then the guy who was in the right-hand seat, the right-hand troop door, the other engineer, saw the other pickup truck just go underneath the number 4 engine. So we were like directly above them. So, there were always questions. There'll always be questions about, so if you would have slammed on the brakes, actually, would they have, would you have stopped before they cross? Where was it? But the amount of seconds and the decision making at the time, I think we're talking about whether we hit the first vehicle or the last vehicle. The fact is they couldn't see us because we had no lights on, and we were on goggles, so we could see them, but they couldn't see us. And the only time they would have known about it is when we would have collided with them, pretty much.
Right.
So that was the situation. That kind of the funny bit afterwards. So Millie says to air traffic, just to let you know, we've had a runway incursion.
It's just a slight one.
Yeah, we just had a runway incursion, and then the guys, and then I did straight on the radio. I went, yeah, just to let you know, guys, a bus has just pulled out in front of us. Now the TAC air traffic guys were in a tent, literally adjacent to where everything happened, and so the guy from 82nd Airborne went, "We know, guys, we didn't think you were going to make it. We were praying for you." and I'd love to meet those guys. We didn't manage to get in contact with them, but they saw the whole thing, and so what happened then is on the ground very quickly, nothing happened, and as in all operations were stopped until I think those vehicles, the two pickup trucks and the bus, I'm fairly sure I know what they were doing because I've spoken to the person who had tasked them. But they had no comms with the tactical air traffic controller. They also didn't know where they were on the airfield because they hadn't had the airfield familiarization brief. So there were other things that they could put in place, and so that was all done. And then operations kind of resumed. I went back. We climbed up, and it was only as we got through 20,000 feet, i.e. out of the threat zone, that all of a sudden we were able to go, yeah, so that just happened, didn't it? It was like, yeah.
Wow.
And everyone was going, okay, yeah, so that was all pretty close. And I went, yeah, and I went into the mission computer, so flight management system, and I was going, how much space did I need to stop? And I was getting the airfield charts out and like drawing. I'm fairly sure I had this much space. And so what I did is I put into the mission computer, how much distance did I need to land? So if I landed at that speed, how much space did I need to stop? And it came out with 1,932. And of course you can overperform, but it was like, well, I'm fairly sure I only had 1,000 feet. So I was fairly sure that I couldn't stop. But it was instinctive. It was really, you're going, did I make the right decision there? Because have I put everyone's lives in danger? And you're questioning that.
Right.
And so I put this all into an air safety report. There was a bit of an embargo on that because we knew this was going to go, everyone was going to go, yeah, Holy Mary, Mother of the
right.
And so I reported that up into the operational chain of command and lots of things, and let the other guys know what happened, and yeah, then it just became a thing, and the story took hold, and kind of the rest is history.